When should you, as the listing agent, agree to prematurely cancel your listing agreement? Now, this topic has come up a few times recently. That's why I want to make this video. Also, you'll see a cancellation of listing form. Now, I already have a different video, how to fill out the cancellation of listing form. Instead, I want to talk about when you should consider canceling as a listing agent, and should you decide to cancel, how to fill this form out so that you're protected. Now, what makes this whole situation unique is that as a listing agent, you're working for free. You're working on spec with the anticipation that you'll ultimately close the transaction, earn a commission, and be able to pay not only your own living expenses, but all your overhead to run your business. And that ranges from your dues, your membership, to your broker fee, to whatever you pay the photographer, or your expenses to actually go to the property and spend your time there. So you're investing all of these resources as a listing agent. So it's not as simple for a client to cancel with you and both of you walk away square. Now, if you're canceling an engagement with an attorney, okay, let's say you retain an attorney and you pay a retainer and the attorney is doing work at an hourly fee and deducting as they go. But all of a sudden that client realizes they're not happy with their attorney. They want to switch to a different attorney. So they call up the attorney and say, hey, freeze, stop right there. Let's settle up whatever you've done up until this point. You can deduct from the retainer, but refund me the difference because I'm going to hire a different attorney. Well, with real estate professionals also offering a professional service, it doesn't work that way since you're working on spec. So you need to protect yourself because in theory, if you're hired as a listing agent and you go out and you pay a photographer, just think about fueling up a vehicle that you're paying to drive over to someone's house and spending your time, your work time, the time in your day that you've allocated to your professional service, whatever you do, and you're over there doing a walkthrough, you're doing an inspection, whatever you're doing to get that listing together. Then you have the administrative component. You've taken pictures or you've paid a photographer. You're uploading them on the MLS. You're spending time inputting data on the MLS. There's all this work that you're putting into. It's your time, it's money spent, your overhead, etc. And so when a seller says, hey, you know what? I want to go a different direction. It's not as simple as an example I gave you where another professional has been paid for their service as they go along. Now, it can be, depending on how you fill out this cancellation of listing, but generally speaking, agents are working on spec knowing that if that cancellation happens, they're likely to eat the cost of the time and money spent so far in the listing. So the first thing to consider after talking about all that you've invested in your listing is, should you even cancel listing prematurely? And I say prematurely because I get asked these questions. Well, what happens when a seller says, hey, I want to cancel now? Do I have to cancel? The answer is no. It's a binding contract. The listing agreement is binding both parties to a listing period that is already predetermined. There's already a start and finish date. In fact, that listing agreement could be invalidated if you didn't put in a start and finish date. So you must have that in there. And given that it's in there and both parties have signed, meaning you and your client, the seller, you're both bound to engage in this marketing effort until the end of that period, until expiration. So if your client wants to cancel early, they don't have a right to. They can't unilaterally say, hey, I want to cancel. And then you say, okay, here you go. Here we're canceling. You can say no. It's that simple. You can say no. It's a binding contract. And sometimes sellers freak out. And they say, well, I'll report you to the DRE or I'll report you to a board. Report what? That you're following the terms of the agreement? That you're behaving yourself? That you're not trying to breach a contract? Excuse me, it's the seller at that point. Think about how insane that is. The seller's breaching the contract. They're saying, I want out. I want to break this contract. And if you don't agree, if you don't facilitate me breaking this contract we both duly agreed to enter into, I'll report you. How about that? So ignore any threat you get about a seller that's unhappy. But the unhappy part is also another key factor because you're not in the business to make people unhappy. Every agent that I know, every agent in their reasonable mind is thinking that they want to sell a property, get the seller as much money as possible for their property, make the seller happy, get referrals from the seller after closing, get positive reviews on Yelp or Google or Zillow. So agents aren't in the business of rubbing people the wrong way and getting them angry. It's bad for business. So that's why there should be a conversation with a seller where you're explaining simply what is going into what you're investing by facilitating the listing. And this really should begin prior to a seller requesting for a cancellation. It should begin when you take the listing, and you need to explain to a seller when you take a listing that you're about to spend serious time, resources, money, however you want to phrase it, on marketing their listing, on setting it up. This isn't just magic, like you just hit a button and there are listings on the MLS and you sit back on cruise control and wait for your check to come in. You're driving back and forth, you're coordinating things. I mean, it's hours and hours. I mean, just to upload listings. I mean, just to run comps. You've spent so much time that goes into it. Okay, so if you decide to cancel, maybe the seller's driving you crazy. Maybe you want out. Maybe for whatever reason, you just simply don't want to proceed, you can do this cancellation of listing form, this car form COL. And if a seller says, hey, I don't want to proceed any further, and you feel the same, this is the form that you'll use. But here's something that I'll mention. Because you've invested the resources in doing it, when you fill this form out, do 1A, okay? Because here's one of the reasons that a seller will cancel. Another agent is whispering in their ear. Okay, they're turning your client against you. This happens all the time. And so, is it fair to you to invest the resources you do to get this listing, enter in the MLS, carry out all the marketing, and then another agent takes over, and then in the listing period, the original listing period that you had, the new agent gets a buyer, and all this takes place within the same listing period of the seller's original listing with you? To me, that sounds extremely unfair. To me, that actually sounds unethical on behalf of a seller. So to prevent that from happening, check 1A, because this basically says that you're owed compensation should the seller enter into a contract within the duration of your original listing period. What's on the listing agreement? Just check 1A. If and when you check 1A, go down here and check number 2 and put the same amount that's on the listing agreement. Remember, you don't have to cancel. You as a listing agent hold the cards. You have leverage. You don't have to let the seller out. Because the frustrating part, and I've had every conversation you can imagine over the years, especially as a broker that has to sign off on a cancellation. And you can tell when a seller is being dishonest because there are legitimate reasons why a seller needs to take their home off the market. And I respect that. That's the way it works. That's the nature of the business. But I also know I can tell when a seller just wants to swap out agents because some other agent is giving them some story that makes them think that the grass is green on the other side. And it's not hard. It's not hard because sellers have doubts. They're nervous. You know, it's nerve-wracking to have your home on the market. You're waiting for an offer. And if some other agent comes in and says, this is how it could be better, this is what I can do to get you a better offer, and they start seducing your seller with promises, well, you can tell because the seller will not want to just let the time run. Because, I mean, the first question is, well, why do you want to cancel? And the seller might say, well, I don't want to market my property anymore. I don't want to sell it. Okay, great. We can take it off the market and just run the time out on the contract. Let it expire. Because they don't have to sell. Just having a listing agreement on file with a broker doesn't mean anything. I mean, if the property is withdrawn from the MLS and not being actively marketed, and the broker just has some listing agreement on file and the listing has gone dormant, I mean, it's not like this is magically going to sell without anyone's consent. But what happens is these sellers that are trying to swap out the agent and work with someone else, they freak out if you even talk about just running the clock out on the current listing agreement. They want the listing agreement signed so they can engage a new agent. I mean, it's pretty easy to tell. I mean, all this comes down to having a reasonable adult conversation and saying, listen, here's where I'm coming from. I've invested in this. I've spent money on this. I've spent a lot of time on this. This is important to me, and I'm working in good faith. And the seller, conversely, should have a very good explanation as to why they're having you do all this unpaid work, and then wanting to terminate the relationship prematurely. Again, you don't have to do that unless you want to. They can't unilaterally terminate on you. Now, like I said, do 1A and then write in the amount that's on your listing agreement there, okay? And then sign the cancellation. Now you're protected. Now if they try to sell during your original listing period, you're owed compensation, okay? Now there's another way to do this. Sometimes someone might say legitimately, listen, I know you spent all this money on staging. I know you spent all this money on photography, but something happened and we're not selling, we're not moving, it's not happening. But the seller may offer to pay some of your expenses. You can go down here and check this box, number 3, and write in a number where you're being reimbursed for what you've spent. Now, like I said, a lot of this should be explained during the listing period, or during the time when you're drafting the listing agreement. Because if you explain to a seller that you are investing time and resources into their listing, you can also ask or have a conversation or even look at it as an upsell. I mean, that sort of conversation in your presentation where if they want staging, if they want something more, if they want you to go above and beyond, you're happy to facilitate it, but should they cancel prematurely, they do need to reimburse you. Why do you want to pay thousands of dollars for staging if someone can turn around and 2 weeks later change their mind? Oh, I had a bad dream last night, I want to cancel. It doesn't work that way. That's why there's a listing period. So at the least, have them reimburse you if you're coming out of pocket. Now, if you run your business and you say, hey, I'm this listing broker and I go around and I offer you a 14-day listing where we guarantee an offer in 14 days, and should we not, we'll cancel anytime. Well, if that's your business model, great, that's fine. You can do that. That's one of many approaches. But do not invest money, or do not invest any more money than you're willing to lose when a seller flippantly cancels. Don't go out and pay for a professional photographer, because that seller has a right to cancel after 14 days. Do you see the point I'm making? If you're going to give a seller an out, then why are you going to wager so much money if the seller can just on a whim cancel? And they do all the time on a whim. And it doesn't help that other agents are constantly seducing sellers. It happens all the time. It's highly annoying. It happens all the time. Okay, now what I see sometimes is where someone will just check this box, principal owes no compensation to the broker. I mean, don't do that. Unless you cannot stand your client, your seller, and you want nothing to do with them, and their money's no good, then you can put that there. But really, you should always do 1A, or at the very least 1B, and give names of potential buyers. 1A is better, it covers everything. 1B is people that have entered the property or made an offer during your listing period. You should always do one of these and then fill out the amount that's on your listing agreement. Why? Because they're the one trying to breach the contract, not you. You have a contract, you invested in it. Don't sell yourself short. Don't let these people off. You're not an attorney. You're not some sort of forensic accountant that takes a retainer and does a bunch of work. And if someone's unhappy, they leave, but you got paid your billable hours for the work you did. You get nothing. You get zero. You lose money when they cancel. That's why you have to be very careful. You need to explain to your client upfront what you're going to invest, the commitment that you make, and the commitment that you expect from the seller, from the client. And then if they try to change it, you need to explain also, you need to have a conversation that they better have a very good reason to basically cost you money to cancel prematurely. And if you have any doubt, don't do it. And if they're unhappy with you as an agent, then switch to another agent, the same brokerage. And we've done that in the past. Maybe someone's not happy with one particular agent. Well, guess what? I mean, at my brokerage, we have over 300 licensees. If you're not happy with one licensee, you don't get to cancel. We'll move you to another licensee. And we'll pay by the way, on a side note, we'll pay the original agent a referral fee. And if you want to let go because you know that the seller, if you're a listing agent and you're willing to walk away from a listing and you know the seller is just going to go and immediately swap you up for another agent, try to get a referral fee. agreement with that new agent, so you can get paid to walk away, to step aside. You want to step aside? You want to let the seller dump you for a different agent that's offering more, that's offering a more attractive package? Okay, fine. Give me a referral fee. So think about it like that. You must guard what you invest. And I'm not talking about doing a bad job or locking in sellers, because I don't advocate that at all. That's just going to give you bad reviews and no referrals. I'm talking about both parties acknowledging what both the commitment that they're making in a listing agreement, and not just walking away or abandoning it because it's bad for business. I hope you found this helpful. Leave a comment. Thanks for watching.